If you ever stayed up until 2 a.m. for the third night in a row and woke up with 4 hours of less sleep, no closer to a solution or a decision, or no peace, there's a reason this keeps happening, and that reason should bother you. There's a quote often attributed to Albert Einstein that says you cannot fix your problems from the same level of thinking that created them. And this is the reason analytical men actually cannot think their way out, and the exit is a lot more counterintuitive than you think. So today, that is exactly what we're going to cover. First, we're going to talk about why your thinking loops live in a part of your brain that your intelligence cannot reach. The three-step process that one of my clients used to improve his mood from a 3 to a 7.9 and cut negative habits by 96% that you can use to step out of these thinking loops, and what exiting these thought loops actually feel like, because I think that part is really misunderstood in the belief work self-development industry. So first, let's start with the problem, and I call this the level problem. Why expert level thinking is always one level above the problem. So an example of this is if you look at any area of life, right? The novice sees a problem and he attacks it directly. And usually what happens with time is he might end up fixing the problem, but he doesn't foresee the 5 other problems this could relate to by the fix that he implemented. So he ends up putting a lot of effort, but only fixes surface level symptoms. Whereas the expert sees the problem and takes a systems level approach and asks, okay, what's the architecture here? What are the relationships between the different elements in the system? And what's the root cause that we're experiencing this problem? So he doesn't fix the issue at a surface level, he also prevents future problems with less effort. So a concrete example of this is if you're in the tech field, this is something that I've seen a lot when I was working in tech, right? A junior developer, this was me when I was just finishing up school at UCLA, working at a startup called Tutorfly. And I would see a bug in the code base and I was excited, oh, let's get this fixed, right? And I would fix the bug, but what would happen is 2 weeks later, the bug I just fixed could create a different bug. And I remember we had a guy, I won't mention his name for his privacy, but we had a guy and literally all of our team would just go to him whenever there was a problem because he had around 10 years of full stack development experience. And we would call him the god of fixes. He's a great character. Anyway, so when he would look at a problem with his level of experience as the senior developer, right? He'd look at the same bug and he'd be very intense for a few seconds and he'd start running simulations of what is the system doing that's actually producing the bug. And then he would fix the bug in a way that would also prevent future problems. So this is the reason why senior developers are paid so much more even when they're doing less work. This is why that developer had the load of 5 engineers in our team and he was compensated a lot more compared to me, who was just coming out of school as a grad at UCLA and coming into his summer internship, right? And this applies to all fields: consulting, entrepreneurship, accounting. What happens is the novice, the junior, tries to fix the problem from inside the problem, but the senior is able to step out of the problem, look at it with a new perspective, and using that approach creates a long-term solution. So how this applies to your belief work is you've actually been the junior developer on your own mind, trying to patch the problems, trying to patch the bugs from the inside, right? And the cost of this is you keep freezing on important life decisions. Maybe you keep avoiding risk. Maybe you keep running simulations of situations that might not happen and losing sleep over it, right? And if you want to fix this, the solution isn't to read the next book, learn the next framework, or the next strategy. It's to actually become the senior developer for your mind by stepping out of the system your mind is looping in. And look at what that loop is producing. So what you need isn't a change in how you think, it's actually the ability to take a new perspective. And again, This is why working with a good mentor can help you progress so much faster in life compared to doing it yourself, right? Because a good mentor won't just teach you new tools, he will also give you new perspectives and ways for you to shift into that perspectives so you can create the change that you want in your life. And you might understand everything we spoke about so far logically and say, this sounds great, I want to do that. But you can still struggle to create the change. And that's because the loops that we think are thinking are not actually thinking, they're based on feelings. So these two parts, the analytical mind and the loops you get stuck in, actually live in two different systems. And let me show you exactly how that architecture works. So Daniel Kahneman wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. It was a very popular book. Maybe you've even read it, right? If you haven't read it, the core idea is your brain runs on two modes. System one is fast, automatic, and it operates through a felt sense. It's a gut feeling, right? And pattern matching. So system one speaks in bodily sensations, in emotions, and in gut reactions. And this system has been running before language was even accessible to us. Whereas system two is slow, deliberate, and analytical. This is the part of you that you think of as the version of you thinking through problems. And system two likes to build arguments, narratives, conclusions. And most likely, as you're listening to this video, you're in system two at the moment. And what happens for analytical men is we've been rewarded for being in system two. So as a result, we put too much time and trust into system two. However, your loops don't actually live there. Your loops live in system one. The rumination, the panic, the spiral, they're not actually thinking, their gut reactions, their thoughts, their fears, right? But by the time system two wakes up and tries to think of a solution, the loop has already been running for hours. So system two, the thinking, can't actually reach system one directly, especially if you feel like you're in a state of threat and your body is reacting that way. So you can't solve a system one problem with a system two problem or with a system two tool, which is what you've been trying to do. Obviously, you can describe the problem, you can build a framework for the problem, but you can't resolve it by thinking harder, because thinking harder runs in system two and the problem is in system one. This is also why sometimes you look at people in your life or your friends and you think, man, this person seems at peace, they seem confident, they seem happier than me, and I put in all this work to improve my life, and they just seem to be living life. It's because they're able to look at system one experiences and process them in a healthy way, whether that's spending time with friends, whether that's going for a workout, whether that's spending time in nature, and they're not actually caught up in these thought loops of trying to think themselves out of a loop. Now, you might be thinking, okay, if I can't think my way out of a loop, what do I do then? Is it game over? And fortunately, it is not game over. There's actually a three-step process for this. However, most analytical men end up ignoring step number one because they're afraid this step might make them too soft, or they might think, oh, it's a little bit woo-woo, right? This three-step process, if you've been seeing the content in the channel, you're familiar with this to some extent, is called the RDT Loop. I call this the senior developer approach to your mind and your belief system. So step one is to regulate. We do that with a 10-minute loving kindness meditation, morning, night, middle of the day, doesn't matter, right? The idea is this helps us regulate the threat system and unlocks our soothing system. And from this place, we actually now go for shifting system one directly, working with our sensations and our emotions. And our nervous system shifts into a point where we can actually come up with creative solutions. So system two doesn't have to be involved here. In fact, if you're in the threat system, so system one is creating all these reactions, you're in this loop, right? System two cannot be activated. The blood and the resources have gone to system one, because system 1 is what helped you survive situations of risk back in the evolutionary days, right? So you literally don't have the equipment to debug your mind from a dysregulated state. That's why we first start with regulation. A lot of analytical men think, oh, yeah, I'm a little bit stressed out, I'm a little bit concerned about this, but once I fix the problem, I'm going to relax. However, the approach is the opposite. What we do is we say, okay, let me unlock more relaxation in my experience right now by imagining someone I love, imagining someone who loves me unconditionally, by even breathing in calmly, whatever helps you, right? And then from that relaxed space, as the soothing system regulates the threat system, we can then find a better solution for the problem that we're working on. Which brings us to step number 2, debug. Debugging means, in the DDA framework, identifying one of the 3 types of faulty mental patterns. You could have introjections, which are beliefs you took away from the outside world and now belief about yourself. Projections are disturbances you paste onto the outside world, and split ego states are conflicts between parts of yourself. So if you have a projection, since you took it from the outside world, the solution is to give it back. If you have a projection, since it was actually yours, but you sent it to the outside world, the solution is to re-own. And if you have a split ego state, the solution is to find dialogue and integrate these 2 parts. And what's important to remember here, and even most mindset coaches or therapists don't actually know this, if you apply the wrong healing modality, you can actually make the issue worse, right? So if you have an introject that says, I'm not good enough, which is guaranteed to have come from an outside experience, and you treat it like a projection and you re-own it, what's going to happen is you're going to feel more like you're not good enough, and that's not what we want, right? Which is why it's important to know the system. Inner work can be an incredible system that you can understand, and that's my intention with every video I create for this channel. So you need to match the healing modality to whatever shadow issue you're working with. Now, for a lot of men and people in general, most common patterns fall into interjects. So if you want to learn more about this, I just released a belief audit video last week, and you can check that out. The third step, once we regulate and debug, is to track, right? This is what makes inner work more measurable for us and allows us to see the invisible change, because by tracking the emotional charges, tracking what's changed, we're actually making it visible. And after a few cycles, you might see, oh, these are the most common loops I get stuck in. And with consistent practice, you can actually practice exiting from those loops. So the relationship you have to the loop changes from, oh, I'm stuck here, there's no way for me to leave, to, I know what this is, and I know exactly what you can do. Which brings us to the 4th part, the exit. What it's actually like to step away from these loops. And a lot of people just misunderstand this, right? And I'm going to break a bubble for you if any of you had this expectation. If you expect euphoria, like, oh my God, I'm going to feel amazing. Or if you expect drama, wow, this is going to be sad and difficult and I don't know if I can do it. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but sometimes, in fact, a lot of the time, stepping out of this loop can actually feel pretty boring, right? Most self-help videos or most transformations promise this emotional high, but that doesn't have to happen. It might also not happen. In fact, you might step out of a loop and say, is this it? And the reason this happens is usually the loop was the mental noise in your head. And you took it as, oh, I'm just problem solving, I'm just thinking. So when the noise leaves, what's left is just life. And day-to-day life can sometimes feel boring or less stimulating, and that's okay, right? Again, if the experience is intense for you, that's fine too, but don't chase the intense experience. And most importantly, If you didn't have an intense experience, don't take that as, oh, I don't think that's working. Let me just quit right now, right? So here's an example from a client I worked with, the client I mentioned earlier, right? Using the RDT process, within a year, he took his mood from a 3 out of 10 to 7.9 out of 10. And he decreased his negative habits by 96%, right? And what's important here is I remember we were on a call one time and he said, life is getting so much better. My relationship with my wife has improved. At work, I got a promotion, but it just feels like very normal and almost effortless. And I said, exactly, that's exactly how it's supposed to feel, right? It doesn't have to feel difficult because we rewire everything through a daily process. If you want to learn more about his transformation, by the way, you can check out this video on your screen. So the problem a lot of analytical men actually stop themselves from breakthroughs is they don't know what they're looking for. So they practice for a bit, they don't get the emotional high, and they say, okay, this isn't working, and they just quit. But they were so close to exiting the loop. It's just exiting the loop can sometimes be boring, and that doesn't market well compared to promising you this amazing breakthrough on a retreat, right? So if you remember one thing from this video, super important, this is it. The thought loops you get stuck in don't have an intellectual solution. There is no information you will acquire that will make the loop go, okay, it's over, I can leave now. The way out is exiting the loop, because remember, the loop is actually driven by system one, emotions that are disguised as thinking. And if you use thinking as a solution, you're trying to attack system one with system two, which doesn't actually help. So what's important to keep in mind as well is the RDT loop only works if you debug the right beliefs for you, right? And in order to help you with this, we just released this resource where you can take a CalmOS Archetype Diagnostic, and it puts you into 3 archetypes: the overthinking analyst, never enough achiever, and misunderstood thinker. If you want to know your archetype, click the link in the description. There should be a quiz link, and you can take a quiz with 6 questions within 3 minutes, and you will know exactly what your archetype is, what belief is running that archetype, and how you can rewire it within the next 7 days, customized for you. So to recap, most men get stuck in life because they're trying to fix the problems from the same level of thinking that created them. The solution actually is to step out and look at the system, right? And your intelligence, your cognitive abilities can't reach the loop a lot of the time because the loop lives in system one, which is more visceral, more emotional, and the thinking lives in system two. 3, you exit the loop by using the RDT loop process. Regulate, debug, and track. And the exit doesn't always have to feel like enlightenment, this emotional high. It can feel very chill, very boring, and that doesn't have to mean you did something wrong. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. In the middle, I covered a very quick overview of the RDT loop. If you want to see it in more depth, here's that 22-minute video where I break down exactly how to run the RDT loop in your life. I will see you in the next video. Appreciate your support.